Hey, quick vid. This is basically for those people that are nonconformists, mainly those that are in rather dubious relationships that most people would shun and reject. This one is about the origins of Wonder Woman, and I think you would be completely shocked and awed once you discover the true inspiration for Wonder Woman. So for all you polygynists, this one's for you. You guys have a good one. Okay, here we go. This is the surprising origin story of Wonder Woman. I'm sure a few of the old heads knew about this, but the majority of us, including me, did not know. So let's go into this thing together now. Where is it at? Okay. The identity of Wonder Woman's creator has been at first kept secret, it said, but the time had come to make a shocking announcement. The author of Wonder Woman is Dr. Moulton Marston, internationally famous psychologist. The truth about Wonder Woman had come out at last. Now, mind you, this story is from 2014. Okay. Wonder Woman's part of the Big Three, the Trinity, DC Trinity, alongside Batman and Superman. She is probably the most famous female superhero comic book character ever. All right, but we're gonna get into how she came to be, and I think you'll be surprised but not shocked. Okay, here we go. You ready? So the veil that has shrouded Wonder Woman's past for 7 decades hides beneath its crucial story about comic books and superheroes and censorship and feminism. As Marston once put it, frankly, Wonder Woman is psychological propaganda for the new type of woman who I believe should rule the world. This was 70 years ago. All right. So basically, when Maxwell Gaines first put out his comics, he was catching a lot of flack for violence and sexual violence, all that good stuff. So, to defend himself against critics, Gaines in 1940 hired Marston as a consultant. Doc Marston has long been an advocate of the right type of comic magazines. Marston held 3 degrees from Harvard, including a PhD in psychology. He led what he called an experimental life. He'd been a lawyer, a scientist, and a professor. He is generally credited with inventing the lie detector test. He was obsessed with uncovering other people's secrets. He'd been a consulting psychologist for Universal Pictures. He'd written screenplays, a novel, and dozens of magazines articles. The fact that a movie studio would hire a psychologist on staff tells you a lot. Okay, if you don't see how this thing is all tied into programming, and I don't know what to tell you. So let's continue. Okay, so in summer of 1940, Olive Richard, a staff writer, here's the key point. Olive Richard, a staff writer for the magazine, visited Marston at his house in Rye, New York, to ask him for his expert opinion about comics. He says some of them are full of torture, kidnapping, sadism, and other cruel businesses. Unfortunately, that is true. Marston admitted that, but when a lovely heroine is bound to the stake, comics followers are sure that the rescue will arrive in the nick of time. The readers wish to save the girl, not see her suffer. Okay, Marston was a man of 1,000 lives and 1,000 lies. Olive Richard was the pen name of Olive Byrne. And she hadn't gone to visit Marston. She lived with Marston. She was the niece of Margaret Sanger, one of the most important feminists of the 20th century. In 1916, Sanger and her sister Ethel Byrne, Olive Byrne's mother, had opened the first birth control clinic in the United States. They were both arrested for illegal distribution of contraception, and in jail in 1917, Ethel Byrne went on a hunger strike and nearly died. There's no such thing as coincidence, people. These people, everybody's all connected. Holy cow. Olive Byrne met Marston in 1925 when she was a senior at Tufts. He was her psychology professor. Marston was already married to a lawyer named Elizabeth Holloway. When Marston and Byrne fell in love, he gave Holloway a choice. Either Byrne could live with them or he would leave her. Byrne moved in. Between 1928 and 1933, each woman bore 2 children. They lived together as a family. Holloway went to work. Byrne stayed home and raised the children. They told census takers and anyone else who asked that Byrne was Marston's widowed sister-in-law. And he quotes, "Tolerant people are the happiest," Marston wrote in a magazine essay in 1939. "So why not get rid of the costly prejudices that hold you back?" He listed the 6 most common types of prejudice. Eliminating prejudice number 6, prejudice against unconventional people and nonconformists, meant the most to him. Byrne's sons didn't find out that Marston was their father until 1963, when Holloway finally admitted it, and only after she extracted a promise that no one would ever raise the subject up again. Gaines didn't know any of this when he met Marston in 1940, or else he would have never hired him. He was looking to avoid controversy, not to court it. Marston and Wonder Woman were pivotal to the creation of what became DC Comics. DC was short for Detective Comics, the comic book in which Batman debuted. In 1940, Gaines decided to counter his critics by forming an editorial advisory board and appointing Marston to serve on it, and DC decided to stamp comic books in which Superman and Batman appeared with the logo, an assurance of quality reading, a DC publication. And since the comics' worst offense was their blood-curdling masculinity, Marston said the best way to fend off critics would be to create a female superhero. February 1941, Marston submitted a draft of his first script explaining the undermeaning of Wonder Woman's Amazonian origins in ancient Greece, where men had kept women in chains until they broke free and escaped. The new women, thus freed and strengthened by supporting themselves on Paradise Island, developed enormous physical and mental power. His comic, he said, was meant to chronicle a great movement now underway, the growth and the power of women. She wore a golden tiara, a red bustier, blue underpants, and knee-high red leather boots. She was a little slinky. She was very kinky. She left Paradise to fight fascism and feminism in America, the last citadel of democracy and equal rights for women. In 1942, the National Organization for Decent Literature put Sensation Comics on its blacklist of publications disapproved for youth for one reason: Wonder Woman is not sufficiently dressed. Gaines decided he needed another expert. He turned to Loretta Bender, an associate professor of psychiatry at New York University Medical School and senior psychiatrist at Bellevue Hospital. Bellevue is where they send all the crazy people, and they do all the experiments on the crazy people, folks. Pay attention. Where she was director of the children's ward and an expert on aggression. She'd long been interested in comics, but her interest had grown in 1940 after her husband, Paul Schilder, was killed by a car while walking home from visiting Bender and their 8-day-old daughter in the hospital. Bender, left with 3 children under the age of 3, soon became painfully interested in studying how children cope with trauma. In 1940, she conducted a study with Reginald Laurie, a medical resident under her supervision, investigating the effects of comics on 4 children brought to Bellevue Hospital for behavioral problems. Tessie, 12, had witnessed her father, a convicted murderer, kill himself. She insisted on calling herself Shira, after a comic book girl who was always rescued in the last minute by the Flash. Kenneth, 11, had been raped. He was frantic unless medicated or wearing Superman cape. He felt safe in it. He could fly away if he wanted to, and he felt the cape protected him from an assault. Bender and Laurie concluded the comic books were the folklore of his age and worked culturally the same way fables and fairy tales did. All propaganda, people. Let's see what else we got. Okay. Here's some. So, for a story about Mars, the god of war, Marston gave Peter an elaborate instructions for the panel in which Wonder Woman is taken prisoner. Close-up, full-length figure of Wonder Woman. Do some careful chaining here. Mars's men are experts. Put a metal collar on Wonder Woman with a chain running off from the panel as though she were chained in a line of prisoners. Have her hands clasped together at her breast with a double band on her wrist. This is BDSM, people. Her Amazon bracelets and another set. Between these runs a short chain about the length of a handcuff chain. This is what compels This is what compels her to clasp her hands together. Then put another heavier, larger chain between her wristbands, which hangs in a long loop to just above her knees. At her ankles, show a pair of arms and hands coming from out of the panel, clasping about her ankles. This whole panel will lose its point and spoil the story unless these chains are drawn exactly as described here. Later in the story, the Wonder Woman is locked in a cell, straining to overhear a conversation in the next room through amplification of bone conduction, so that the bones in the ear register sound waves. They vibrate. Same device that they implant into the side of the head that you're able to take calls. I forget, he was an MIT student. He implanted a jawbone Bluetooth device on the side of his head, and he's able to pick up calls and things through the bones vibrating in his ear. Okay. She takes her chain in her teeth. Close up of Wonder Woman's head, shoulders. She holds her neck between her teeth. The chain runs taut between her teeth and the wall, where it is locked to a steel rig bolt. All right. Final points. Gaines was troubled. Who worked on Superman 2, had invented kryptonite. She believed superheroes ought to have vulnerabilities. She told Gaines she thought Wonder Woman ought to be more like Superman, and just as Superman couldn't go back to the planet Krypton, Wonder Woman ought not to be able to go back to Paradise Island, where the kinkiest stuff tended to happen. In a memo, Gaines Rubik reported that Bender does not believe Wonder Woman tends to masochism or sadism. She also liked the way Marston was playing with feminism. She believes that Dr. Marston is handling very cleverly this whole experiment, as she calls it. She feels that perhaps he is bringing to the public the real issue at stake in the world, and one which she feels may possibly be direct cause of the present conflict, and that is the difference between the sexes is not a sex problem nor a struggle for superiority, but rather a problem of the relation of one sex to the other. Dr. Bennett believes this ship should be left alone. Okay, so basically at the end of the day, Wonder Woman is based off of Dr. Marston's second wife, and this was the springboard to further feminism and that the propaganda behind it. It took 70 years for this thing to come to fruition. When I say these people are decades ahead of everybody and their plans, this is exactly what I mean. So hope you guys enjoyed and learned something out of the original history of Wonder Woman. Y'all have a good one. Peace.